Some betrayals hit like a hurricane. Mine was a dry whisper over a baby monitor I should not have been listening to. My husband thought he was playing a harmless game with our nanny. He did not know that Nanny was connected to the only man in Denver who could destroy him. And he definitely did not know that I, his forensic accountant wife, had already booked that man first. My name is Maya. I am 38 years old, and my job is finding lies. At Quantum Financial Forensics, I am the one they call when millions disappear into thin air, when a C-suite executive's lifestyle does not match their salary. I can smell fraud the way a bloodhound tracks a scent, digging through spreadsheets and shell corporations until I find the rot. I live in a starkly modern house in Cherry Creek, all glass and white walls, with my husband, Grant. Grant is 40. He is the charismatic frontman for Apex Skyline Developments, a man who can sell a vision of the Denver skyline and charm city councils into approving impossible projects. We have a son, Leo. He is 4 years old, and he is the one clean, uncomplicated truth in my life. It was a Tuesday night. I was working late in my home office, immersed in the digital guts of a complex embezzlement case. The house was silent, except for the quiet click of my keyboard and the white noise from Leo's baby monitor on my desk. He was fast asleep down the hall. Then, a new sound broke the static. It was interference, a digital bleed-through, the frequency of the living room security camera, the one I had installed. Not Grant was crossing paths with the monitor, and through the static, I heard whispers, Grant's voice, low and thick with suggestion, and a high, breathless giggle. Chloe, our nanny, 22 years old and new. Grant was supposed to be helping her with an online class she was taking. That was the premise, but the words I heard were not academic. He was talking about her potential. He was telling her how smart and beautiful she was, and how refreshing it was to be around someone who really saw him. My wife, he murmured, and my fingers froze on the keys. Maya. She just doesn't appreciate me anymore. Not really. I did not move. I did not storm down the hall. The rage came fast and hot, but my professional instinct came faster. Rage is a liability. Data is an asset. My hands moved on their own, minimizing the fraud case. I opened the encrypted video feed from the living room camera on my secured workstation monitor. And I saw them. They were on our sofa, the gray sectional where I read Leo his bedtime stories. Nothing physical was happening. Not yet. But the intimacy was repulsive. He was leaning into her space, his hand accidentally brushing her arm as he pointed to her laptop screen. She was tilted toward him, her head angled, soaking in the attention. He was feeding on her validation. She was basking in his power. My training took over. This was not a personal betrayal. This was a hostile event requiring documentation. I hit the record button. I watched, cold and methodical, as the video captured 15 minutes of evidence. The loaded pauses, the lingering touches, the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. I was about to stop the recording when Grant laughed. You know, with a brain like that, you shouldn't just be a nanny. You've got that heavy-hitter lawyer uncle. Right. You should be using your connections. Chloe giggled, but it sounded nervous. Oh, God, you mean Uncle Julian? No, he's all business. He probably doesn't even know I exist. He wouldn't care about my life. My blood turned to ice. I knew that name. Julian Croft. There is only one Julian Croft in Denver. He is the most feared, the most ruthless, the most surgically precise divorce and asset forfeiture attorney in the state of Colorado. My own firm had faced his team twice in high-stakes corporate fraud disputes. Croft did not just win. He scorched the earth. He was the weapon you hired when you wanted to ensure your opponent was left with absolutely nothing. And my husband was trying to get into his niece's pants, in my living room, on my camera. I closed the video feed. The emotional shockwave hit, sharp and sickening, but I did not let it crest. I am a forensic accountant. I do not ride waves. I analyzed their impact. This was no longer a marriage. This was a hostile engagement, a high-stakes financial scenario with an unacceptable liability. My husband was a fool, and the nanny was a landmine. I switched immediately into work mode. For the next 2 hours, I did not cry. I dug. I used the professional-grade background check software we utilize at Quantum. Chloe was not just Chloe. She was Chloe Ann Croft. The innocent 22-year-old girl sitting on my sofa was the daughter of Julian Croft's estranged older brother. A niece? Yes, but a Croft nonetheless. A member of a legal dynasty. The threat matrix clarified instantly. The flirtation I recorded was grounds for a harassment suit. Grant, a senior developer at Apex, flirting with the nanny in his own home. It was toxic. Apex, his company, was currently neck-deep in a publicly funded downtown redevelopment project. A scandal like this, a senior executive, a young employee, a vulnerable setting would be catastrophic. It would kill the public trust, trigger audits, and jeopardize millions in city funding. Grant had not just risked our marriage, he had risked his entire career and his company's reputation. But that was only the first layer. The second was personal. If I filed for divorce, Grant, in his panic, might run to Julian Croft. Or worse, Chloe would run to her Uncle Julian, crying, painting me as the cruel, older wife who fired her for nothing. Croft would then have a personal reason to destroy me. He would see it as protecting his family. He would bury me in court, using Apex's resources against me. Grant would be the victim. I would be the villain. I saw only one path forward. It was narrow, expensive, and had to be walked immediately. I could not let Grant or Chloe get to Julian Croft. I had to get there first. I had to buy the biggest gun in Denver and point it at my own head, just so my husband could not use it against me. It was 3 a.m. The house was dead silent. I pulled up my firm's privileged contact database and found the address I needed. Julian Croft's personal intake email, the one reserved for billionaires and senators. I drafted an email. It was professional, brief, and cold. Subject: urgent consult. High-value asset concealment. The body was equally sparse, stating my name and my request for his immediate services regarding a complex financial matter. Then, I opened my personal savings account, the one I had maintained since before our wedding. The in case of emergency fund I had built from my first bonus. I initiated a wire transfer, $20,000. In the memo line, I typed retainer Maya Jensen. I hit send. I watched the clock. I did not sleep. At exactly 7 a.m., an automated confirmation hit my inbox. At 8:01 a.m., my phone rang. It was not Croft. It was his assistant, a woman who sounded like she drank polished steel for breakfast. "Ms. Jensen," she said, her voice crisp. "Mr. Croft has had a sudden opening in his schedule. He can see you today at 4 p.m. Will that be acceptable?" It was a test, a $20,000 opening. "Yes," I said. "That is perfect. I will be there." I hung up. I heard the shower turn off down the hall. A few minutes later, Grant came downstairs, whistling. He was dressed in his favorite suit, smelling like expensive soap, the picture of the successful husband. He walked up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed my neck. I did not flinch. "Morning," he murmured against my skin. "I had a massive breakthrough on the downtown project last night. Had to work late, just hammering out the zoning. I think I finally cracked it." The lie was so easy, so smooth. He pulled away to pour himself a coffee. I turned, managing a smile. I picked up his favorite mug and handed it to him. "That's wonderful, honey. Truly. I am so glad." I took a sip of my own cold coffee. "I actually have a big new client meeting this afternoon, so I might be late. Do not wait up for me." Julian Croft's office was on the 50th floor, a space designed to intimidate. It was not just luxurious, it was severe. The walls were paneled in a wood so dark it looked black, and the air smelled faintly of old leather and money. His desk was a single, massive slab of polished granite, and the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him presented the entire Denver skyline like a map he owned. It was a room designed to make kings feel small. I sat in the single, brutally modern leather chair opposite him, a chair I noted was intentionally calibrated 2 inches lower than his own. Croft himself was exactly as I remembered from the corporate disputes. He was in his mid-50s, sharp, and dressed in a bespoke suit that was a quiet statement of profound wealth. He did not smile. He did not waste energy on charm. Grant had enough of that for the both of them. Croft radiated a cold, absolute authority. He steepled his fingers, his eyes analytical, scanning me as if I were a balance sheet. "Ms. Jensen," my assistant said, "asset concealment. My specialty." "Whose assets are we finding?" I did not meet his gaze with defiance, but with the cool neutrality of a colleague. I slid a thin leather-bound folder across the vast expanse of granite, mine and my husband's, Grant Jensen of Apex Skyline. A single perfectly groomed eyebrow raised perhaps a millimeter. "You're filing for divorce." "I am," I said, my voice steady. "But that is not the primary reason I am here. I am here to hire you, specifically." I pushed a second identical folder toward him. This one contained the time-stamped transcripts of the audio from the baby monitor. It also contained a slim USB drive holding the 15-minute video file. Croft opened the folder. He read the transcript, and I watched him for any flicker of emotion. Nothing. His face was a mask of professional disinterest as he read Grant's pathetic, loaded lines, the complaints about his unappreciative wife. He was a statue. Then his eyes hit the bottom of the first page. He scanned the name, and I saw it. It was not a movement. It was a change in density. His focus sharpened, and the air in the room grew colder. He looked up. His eyes were no longer analytical. They were chips of ice. "Chloe is my brother's daughter," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "I know," I replied. "I am a forensic accountant. I do my research before I make an investment." I let that hang in the air. "My $20,000 retainer cleared your trust account at 7:05 this morning. You are, as of that moment, my lawyer." Which means, I leaned forward, lowering my voice, "You are ethically and legally conflicted out from representing your niece, or my husband, in any matter related to this. You cannot advise her. You cannot represent him. You cannot take his case, even if he begs." The silence that followed was heavy. I had just walked into the lion's den and welded the cage shut from the inside. He was trapped by his own ironclad code of ethics and his exorbitant fee structure. I could see the cold fury in his eyes, but I could also see something else, a microscopic flicker of professional respect. I had used his own rules against him. He stared at me, processing the move. I did not let him sit with it for long. I pressed the advantage. "I do not want to destroy your niece, Mr. Croft," I said quietly. "She is 22. She was foolish, and my husband is a predator. I want to fire her, quietly. I want her to sign a non-disclosure agreement and disappear from my life. I am prepared to be generous in her severance to ensure that—" I paused, letting the offer land. Then, the second maneuver. "But my husband," I continued, "he is a much larger problem. He is a liability, and as it happens, his company, Apex Skyline, is another one of your clients." This time, I saw a definitive reaction, a tightening around his jaw. "I know you handle their corporate contracts," I went on. "The big ones. I imagine you were involved in structuring the downtown redevelopment deal." I gestured toward the window, toward the cranes piercing the sky. "That is a massive, publicly funded project. A lot of political capital tied up in that. It would be catastrophic. If a messy labor scandal were to surface right now, a senior developer, a young nanny, accusations of harassment in his own home, It would look terrible for Apex. It might even trigger an ethics review of their city funding. Wouldn't it? Julian Croft's eyes held mine for a beat longer. The anger was there, but it was banked, controlled by a pragmatism that I, as an accountant, deeply respected. He had been outmaneuvered, and he was smart enough to know that fighting the move was less important than controlling the outcome. He was protecting his firm, and he was protecting Apex. I had become the necessary, if unpalatable, solution. What do you want, Ms. Jensen?" he asked. His voice was flat. The chess game was over. We were now negotiating the terms of his king's survival. I did not pause. I had rehearsed this. "1," I said, ticking a point off in my mind. "You will draft a termination agreement for Chloe. It will include a non-disclosure agreement so restrictive that she cannot whisper my name or grants in a public setting without facing financial ruin. I will pay her 2 months' severance for her signature." 2, I continued, my voice unwavering. "You will call your contact at Apex, not Grant, the CEO. You will inform him that you are representing me, Maya Jensen, in my divorce from Grant Jensen. You will state that due to a sensitive internal matter that has come to your attention, it is your firm's strong recommendation that Grant be removed from the downtown redevelopment project, effective immediately, indefinitely. You will not provide details. The implication of your involvement will be enough of a threat. And 3, I finished, you will use your forensic team, the best ones, to conduct a deep dive asset search on my husband. I have already found the surface accounts. I need you to find the ones he thinks are invisible, the offshore holdings for his side projects, the ones a wife might miss, but a forensic accountant suspects." He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning quietly. He was processing the collateral damage and the containment strategy. I had just handed him the tools to cauterize the wound his niece and his client's employee had created. It was the only logical move. Protecting Apex, his corporate client, was his primary financial imperative. Silencing his niece was his primary personal one. I was the bridge between the two. "This will be done," he said. It was not an agreement. It was a verdict. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Croft. I will await your team's report." I walked out of the office, past the terrified-looking assistant, and into the elevator. As I descended 50 floors, I did not feel relief. I felt calm. This was a controlled demolition. The emotional part was over. Now, it was just structural. I drove home. The house was quiet when I entered. Leo was napping. I found Chloe in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, a half-eaten yogurt on the counter. She looked up, smiling, completely oblivious. "Oh, hi, Maya." Leo just went down for his nap. I stood on the other side of the marble island. I kept my voice polite, level. The same voice I used for corporate audits. "Chloe, your employment here is terminated, effective immediately." Her smile froze and slid off her face. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" "I've arranged for 2 months' salary as a severance package," I continued, ignoring her question. "The paperwork will be delivered here from my law firm within the hour. It includes a standard non-disclosure agreement. I advise you to sign it promptly." Her eyes filled with tears. The predictable, youthful panic. "Maya, please, I love Leo." What did I do? Was it something Grant said I don't understand? She started to sob, the picture of wronged innocence. I looked at her, my patience gone. I had no more time for this. "My lawyer is Julian Croft," I said. "I suggest you call him if you have any questions." The name hit her like a physical slap. The tears stopped. Instantly. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly, pale mask. She knew that name. She knew exactly what it meant. It meant she did not call him. It meant she did not speak. It meant this was over. She understood, in that moment, that she was not a participant in a silly flirtation. She was a piece of evidence in a war she could not comprehend. "Get your things," I said. my voice softer now. The courier will be here soon. She did not say another word. She ran upstairs, and I heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of a suitcase zipper. 30 minutes. That was all it took. She came down the stairs, dragging her suitcase, her eyes red but terrified, fixed on the floor. She did not look at me. She scrambled out the front door just as I saw Grant's car pull into the driveway. He walked in, whistling, loosening his tie, the smell of his self-satisfaction filling the entryway. "Hey," he called out, expansive and cheerful. "That was a hell of a day. Where's Chloe? I wanted to ask her about that." He stopped, looking around the empty kitchen. "Chloe." I was in the kitchen, strapping Leo into his high chair. The aroma of simmering tomato sauce filled the air. Domesticity. Control. "Chloe," Grant asked again, his voice echoing slightly in the foyer. I spooned some pasta and sauce onto Leo's tray. I let her go. He walked into the kitchen, pulling at his tie. "You what? What do you mean? You let her go?" "I wasn't happy with her work," I said, not looking up. I wiped a small smudge of sauce from Leo's chin. He stared at me, his affable husband mask slipping. I could see the flash of pure panic in his eyes. He was trying to calculate what she might have said, what she might have seen. "Maya, you can't just—" "She was great. Leo loves her. We should have discussed this." His voice was rising, a sharp, indignant edge replacing the charm. "I did discuss it," I said calmly. I met his gaze. "With my lawyer. It's all been handled." He froze. The words hung in the air between us, over the sound of Leo happily banging his spoon. "Your lawyer," he repeated, his voice incredulous. "You hired a lawyer. To fire a nanny. What the hell is that? Maya, that's insane." I felt it was a sensitive termination. "I wanted it handled professionally," I said. "Dinner's almost ready." He stared at me for another long moment, his mind clearly racing, searching for the trap. He found nothing in my expression. I was just a wife, feeding our child. He let out a frustrated breath, shaking his head. I don't even know what this is. Fine. Whatever. You handled it." He grabbed a beer from the fridge and went to the living room, the one I had watched him in just 24 hours earlier. The next morning, he left for work. The tension was thick, but he was trying to pretend everything was normal. He had a big presentation. He was back to being Grant, the Skyline developer. At 10:05 a.m., I received a one-word email from Julian Croft's assistant, Dunn. I knew Grant would have just been called into the CEO's office. I did not have to wait long. He was home by 6 p.m., which was hours earlier than usual. I heard the front door slam, a sound so violent it made Leo jump. Grant stormed into the kitchen. He was not just angry, he was terrified. His face was a pale, sickly white, and he was visibly trembling, his hands balled into fists. "What did you do?" he hissed. The charm was gone. This was the man underneath. I was at my laptop at the kitchen island, scrolling through a complex spreadsheet. I looked up, feigning mild surprise. "I don't know what you're talking about. Grant, you're scaring Leo." "Do not," he spat. "Do not do that. Do not hide behind him. What did you do?" "I'm working," I said simply. "I was pulled off the downtown project," he said, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and fear. "Pulled off. Indefinitely. The biggest deal of my career. They said it was on the advice of corporate counsel. Our corporate counsel, Maya, is Julian Croft." He was breathing hard, pacing, a cornered animal. "So I want you to explain to me, very slowly, why your lawyer, the one you hired to fire a 22-year-old nanny, is suddenly calling my CEO and torpedoing my career." I looked down at the spreadsheet on my screen. It was beautiful. It was the first report from Croft's forensic team. A lovely list of wire transfers to an undeclared shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A very interesting side project. I looked back up at my husband. The last thread of my old life snapped. I don't know. Grant, I said, my voice as cold and clear as glass. Maybe it's about the nanny you were flirting with on our sofa last night. I watched his face collapse. The one who happens to be his niece. I let the words land, hard. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? The revelation hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. Grant's arrogance did not just fade, it shattered. It was a physical collapse. He stumbled back, his hand gripping the edge of the marble island as if to hold himself upright. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy, pale sheen of pure, undiluted terror. He knew how bad his niece looked. He tried to rally. He tried to access the charm that had always been his primary weapon, but his voice came out thin and desperate. Flirting, he stammered, trying to form a laugh that died in his throat. Maya, that was nothing. It was harmless. We were just talking. You know how I am. You're destroying my career over nothing. I slowly closed my laptop. The soft click echoed in the silence. I turned to face him, my entire body calm. The shock was gone. I was just an auditor now, and he was the fraudulent account I was about to close. Was it nothing when you touched her arm? Grant, I asked, my voice low and even. Was it nothing when you told a 22-year-old girl that your wife doesn't appreciate you? Was it nothing when you risked the biggest project of your career and the reputation of your entire company for a cheap thrill? He saw it then. He saw that the woman he married was gone. The wife he could placate with a kiss or a well-timed excuse had been replaced by the forensic accountant he only talked about at cocktail parties. You can't do this, he whispered. You can't. He scrambled for his own laptop, yanking it open on the counter. He was no longer trying to argue with me. He was trying to assess his financial exposure. He knew he needed a lawyer, his own shark, and he needed one now. I watched him. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to log into our joint brokerage account. He was trying to move his side project money. He was trying to build a defense. I heard the rapid, frantic tap, tap, tap of the trackpad. I heard the muffled curses. What did you do? He whispered, his back to me. The anger was gone, replaced by a high-pitched, childish panic. Maya, the accounts, the savings. I can't get in. What did you do? I turned to the sink and began to calmly wash Leo's dinner plate. I didn't do anything, I said over the sound of the running water. My lawyer did. I turned off the tap and dried my hands, looking at him. Julian Croft's team filed an emergency petition with the court at 8 a.m. this morning, just as it opened. They cited clear and immediate evidence of marital asset dissipation, with intent to defraud. Dissipation, he asked, his voice cracking. The Cayman Islands Shell Corporation, I clarified, watching his eyes widen in horror. The one you've been funding for the last 18 months. My evidence, his petition. A judge granted the order by 8:30. All joint assets are frozen. Grant. All of them. Pending a full forensic review. The implication settled on him. He was financially neutered. The man who defined himself by his deals and his income, could not afford to hire a lawyer. He could not even pay for a consultation. He was trapped. The next 12 hours were a pathetic spectacle. He tried to call Chloe. I heard him pacing in his home office, his voice pleading into her voicemail. Chloe, it's Grant. You have to call me. This is a misunderstanding. You have to talk to your uncle. You have to tell him it was just talk. Please. He'll listen to you. Just call me. He did not know that Chloe had already signed her NDA, that her severance check for 2 months' salary was contingent on her permanent silence. She would never answer. Next, he called his parents. They were wealthy, from old, careful money. They had always been wary of Grant's high-flying lifestyle. I heard his side of the conversation. It was muffled, broken by sobs. He was painting me as a vindictive monster, a lunatic who had hired the devil himself. They must have agreed to help because his panic subsided slightly. They would hire a lawyer for him. The man they hired was, I am sure, very competent. A family friend who specialized in trusts and estates. The next day, the house was a prison. Grant was a ghost in it, pacing the halls, his face gray. I heard him on the phone with his new lawyer, and then I heard him shout, a raw sound of pure frustration. I knew exactly what had happened. His new, capable lawyer had called Julian Croft's office. He had identified himself, stated he was representing Grant Jensen, and been met by an impenetrable wall of polite, professional ice. He would have been told Mr. Croft was in court, that all discovery requests must be submitted in writing, and that all communication would be handled by Mr. Croft's lead associate. He had been stonewalled. He had been dismissed. He was a rowboat trying to challenge a battleship. Grant was stuck. He was trapped in the house with me. He sat on the expensive sofa in the living room, staring blankly at the dark television screen. I walked past him, taking Leo out for a walk in the stroller. I was polite. I was quiet. And in my office, my laptop was glowing, filled with the new spreadsheets Croft's team was sending over. I was working. He was just waiting, a shadow in his own home. The Cayman account was just the appetizer. My team and Croft's team worked in parallel, running a 24/7 operation. We were a well-oiled machine, fueled by my intimate knowledge of Grant's habits and Croft's limitless legal resources. We knew Grant. He was a developer. His entire world was built on hiding infrastructure in plain sight. The money we found offshore was his liquidity, not his foundation. We needed the foundation. I was stuck. I was reviewing our joint tax returns from the last 5 years, searching for a depreciation schedule, a rental loss, anything that would point to a physical asset I had missed. And then I saw it, a line item for specialty tooling lease. It was minor, just a few $1,000s a year, not enough to flag. But I knew Grant did not lease tools. Then I remembered. His hobby. He was restoring a 1967 Mustang. It was his masculine cliché, his escape. He kept it in a private garage, a high-end car condo complex over in Inglewood, far from our Cherry Creek home. He always said it was his one indulgence. I had never been there. He said it was his space. I was a fool. It was not a hobby. It was an off-site office. Croft's court order was beautifully broad. It gave me, his forensic representative, access to any and all properties leased or owned by Grant Jensen, joint or individual. I went the next morning. I left Leo with a new, bonded, and very expensive temporary nanny sourced from an agency, one who came with no legal relatives in the state of Colorado. The garage complex was anonymous and exclusive. My court order and a locksmith got me inside. The garage smelled of oil, wax, and cold concrete. The Mustang was there, under a dust cover, a half-finished monument to his ego. But I was not there for the car. I went to the workbench. It was a heavy-duty steel cabinet. Tools were arranged neatly on a pegboard above it, too neatly. It looked staged. My fingers ran along the underside of the workbench, feeling for seams. In my work, you learn that the most sophisticated security is often just a well-hidden false panel. I found it. A small magnetic latch, disguised as a bolt. Inside the hollow space was not cash. It was better. It was data. 3 encrypted hard drives and a single, old-fashioned, black-bound physical ledger, the smoking gun. I did not touch them with my bare hands. I documented, photographed, and bagged them. I did not take them home. I took them to my office at Quantum, to my clean room, a place where data could be pulled without any risk of corruption. It was not just a flirtation. Grant, my charming, charismatic husband, had been running a sophisticated, multi-layered criminal enterprise for at least 3 years. The Cayman account was just the drain. The hard drives showed the entire plumbing system. He had been using substandard materials on Apex projects. He approved invoices for high-grade steel and concrete, then signed off on deliveries of cheaper, inferior products. The downtown redevelopment project, his baby, was riddled with it. He was funneling the massive cost savings into his personal LLC, the one I had found. That was just the first part of the scam. The second part was what the LLC was doing with that money. The physical ledger, cross-referenced with the drives, showed a pattern of real estate purchases. Small, cheap, commercial properties. All of them were located along the proposed route for the next major city development. A light rail expansion project that was still in closed-door committee meetings. A project he was, I knew, secretly and illegally lobbying for from the inside. He was not just cheating on me. He was not just cheating his company. He was committing massive systemic corporate fraud. He was engaging in insider trading. I sat back, the air thin in my sterile office. My husband was not just an adulterer. He was a white-collar criminal on a scale that would send him to federal prison for a decade. Then I saw the final piece, the ledger, the physical one. It detailed the cash flow that was not on the drives, regular payments, a line item listed only as consultant. The name next to it was one I recognized immediately from the Denver Post. It was a city council member who sat on the Planning and Zoning Committee. This was not just fraud. This was bribery of a public official. This was a RICO case. A sudden, cold understanding washed over me. I thought back to that night, to the baby monitor, to Grant, talking about Chloe's connections. He was not just trying to get into her pants because he was bored. He was probing. He was a criminal, assessing his landscape. He was trying to figure out if Uncle Julian was a problem he needed to avoid, or, God help us, a potential asset he could one day corrupt. The flirtation was not just a betrayal of our marriage. It was reconnaissance for his empire. I did not call Julian Croft from my home. I called him from my secure office line at Quantum. He picked up on the first ring. Croft. Mr. Croft. It's Maya Jensen, I said. The asset concealment I hired you to find. It's bigger than we thought. The garage in Inglewood was productive. I gave him the summary. The material fraud. The insider trading. The city council member. It's not a divorce, I concluded. It's a RICO case. The silence on the other end was absolute, a vacuum of pure, cold rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low growl. He was not angry at me. He was furious at Grant. He was furious at the massive criminal liability that had been festering inside his corporate client, introduced by a mid-level executive who had the audacity to involve his niece. My office, he said. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring your husband, and bring his associate. He meant Grant's lawyer. Then he hung up. We were a grim procession walking into that 50th floor office. Grant, his parents' lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an off-the-rack suit, and me. Grant had apparently decided on a new tactic, righteous indignation. He was trying to project the air of a wronged husband, a man ready to fight for his rights, for custody, for the house. He was still trying to play the game, blind to the fact that the board had been flipped over and set on fire. We were shown into the main conference room, not his office. This was formal. Julian Croft was already seated at the head of a 20-foot mahogany table. I took a seat to his right, placing my own leather-bound folder in front of me. Grant and his lawyer sat opposite us, the vast expanse of polished wood separating us like a canyon. Grant started to speak. Look, Julian, I think there's been a massive over Croft held up a hand, a silent, imperious gesture that shut Grant's mouth instantly. Mr. Jensen, Croft said, his voice resonating with cold power. We are no longer discussing your divorce. We are discussing your impending federal indictment. With a theatrical, almost dismissive gesture, Croft slid a single black-bound book across the table. The ledger. It spun slowly and came to a stop directly in front of Grant's lawyer. I believe you'll find that illuminating, Croft said. The lawyer opened it. He read the first page. His face went pale. He flipped to a section I had tabbed in red. His hand began to shake. He looked up from the ledger, then at the hard drives sitting next to Croft, then at me. He saw the full, horrific picture. Croft began to list the charges, his voice a calm monotone. Corporate fraud, wire fraud, bribery of a public official. Just for starters. The lawyer swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He slowly closed the ledger and placed both of his hands on top of it. He looked at his client. "Grant," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Do not say another word. Not one." I let the silence stretch, letting Grant's world collapse. I watched the bravado, the indignation, the charm, all of it just evaporate, leaving behind the weak, terrified man I now recognized. Then, I spoke. It was the first time I had addressed him directly. "Here is the offer, Grant," I said, my voice clear and cutting in the dead quiet room. "You will sign this settlement agreement." I slid my own folder across the table to his lawyer. "These are the terms," I said. "They are not negotiable." I laid it out. "I receive 100% of the equity in the Cherry Creek house. You will vacate by the end of the week. I receive full and sole custody of Leo. You will be allowed supervised visitation, once a month, pending the outcome of your other legal matters." I saw a flicker of protest in his eyes, the Leo part hitting a nerve. I pressed on before he could speak. "I will receive 80% of all liquid assets, including the funds in the Cayman LLC, which will be repatriated in full. We will call that restitution for the damages from your fraud. I retain 100% of my premarital assets, my stake in Quantum, and my personal savings. The agreement is total. It is finite. You get a clean break, and 20% of the cash you didn't steal." Grant stared at me, his mouth open, speechless. His lawyer was frantically reading the agreement, his pallor deepening. "And one more thing," I said. I slid a second single-page document across the table. It landed next to the settlement. "What is that?" Grant whispered. "That," I said, "is your full, written, and signed confession. It details the material fraud against Apex. It details the suppliers you used, the substandard materials you approved, and the methods you used to funnel the money. It does not mention the city council member. We are keeping that separate." Grant looked at me, utterly lost. "You want me to sign this? This is suicide." "It's the opposite," I said. "You will give this confession to me. I will give it to Julian. Julian will then use it to protect his client, Apex, from the catastrophic liability you created. He will use it to shield them from public scandal, to go after the suppliers, and to clean house internally. He will save them, and you, from a public implosion." I leaned forward. "In exchange for this, we will not be the ones to call the FBI. Apex will handle your internal discipline quietly. You will be fired, obviously. You will be bankrupted, but you might not go to prison for this. They may decide that a public trial is worse for them than letting you disappear. Or," I shrugged, "they might hand your confession to the U.S. Attorney's Office a week from now. That, Grant, is entirely up to them. But this is the only path forward that doesn't end with me personally testifying at your federal sentencing." Grant stared at the two piles of paper. On his left, the settlement that erased him from our lives, giving me everything. On his right, the confession that erased his future, giving him to the law. One document represented his financial and personal ruin. The other, his criminal and professional ruin. He was a man with two pistols pointed at his head, being asked which one he preferred. His lawyer, the man from the trust and estates firm, leaned in close, his voice a papery, defeated whisper. "They have you, Grant. They have you on all of it. This isn't a negotiation. It's a surrender. You have to sign. It's the only chance you have." Grant's eyes flickered from the papers to my face. He tried one last time, reaching for the man I used to know, the husband he used to be. The charm was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading desperation. "Maya," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Maya, please. Leo. Think about Leo. Don't. Don't do this to me. I'll give you the divorce. I'll agree. Just don't. Don't take everything." I looked at him, not with hate, not with anger. I felt nothing at all. It was the cold, clean emptiness of a ledger that has just been balanced. "You," I said, my voice cutting through his plea, "dared to risk our son's home. You risked my financial future, the one I built before I ever met you, and the one I was building for our family. You put the entire reputation of your company on the line, all for greed, all for a little more, and a little more." I leaned forward, just an inch. "You started this spiral by betraying me with a 22-year-old girl in our living room." The flirtation wasn't the crime, Grant. It was the symptom. It was the red flag. It showed me exactly who you had become. I held his gaze. It told me to look closer. That was what finally broke him. He made a small, choked sound, the last of his bluster, his indignation, his entire carefully constructed personality, just dissolved. He put his head in his hands and he began to cry. It was not the sound of a man mourning his family. It was not the grief of a husband who had lost his wife and son. It was the pathetic, selfish wail of a man who had been caught. He was crying for himself. His lawyer slid the pen and the first document, the divorce settlement, in front of him. Grant's hand was shaking so badly he could barely grip the pen. He wiped his face with his free hand, leaving a wet smear. He scribbled his name, a jagged, broken signature that was a proxy for the man himself. He pushed it away. Then, his lawyer nudged the second document, the confession. Grant picked up the pen again. His eyes traveled from his lawyer, who was staring fixedly at the table, to Julian Croft, who was watching with the impassive curiosity of a scientist. And finally, his eyes landed on me. He was looking for his wife. He was looking for Maya, but she was not there. My face was blank. He was looking at the forensic accountant who had just closed the biggest case of her career. With a final gasping sob, he signed the confession. He pushed it, weakly, across the polished wood toward me. It was his final act of surrender. I did not move. I did not reach for it. My hands remained folded in front of me. The document sat in the no-man's land between us. Then, Julian Croft's hand entered my field of vision. He slowly, deliberately, picked up the confession. He scanned the signature. He checked that it was dated. He folded it once, with crisp precision, and slid it into his own breast pocket. He stood up. The meeting was over. "My client, Ms. Jensen," Croft announced to the room, "has nothing more to say to you. Ever." Grant and his lawyer stumbled out of the conference room. Two men hollowed out and broken. The lawyer looked like he had aged 10 years. Grant just looked gone. The door clicked shut, leaving Julian Croft and me alone in the vast, silent room. I stood up and smoothed the front of my suit jacket. The adrenaline was gone. I just felt quiet. The house had been cleansed. Croft looked at me, and for the first time, the cold, analytical mask was gone. In his eyes, I saw a new, sharp respect. It was the look of one predator acknowledging another. "He will be fired by the end of the day," Croft stated, walking over to the window. "His confession gives Apex all the leverage they need. They'll bury the fraud to avoid the public scandal and the SEC investigation, but they will use it to claw back every dime from his offshore accounts, the accounts which now belong to you. He will be broke, and he will be blacklisted. He won't be able to get a job managing a fast food restaurant in this state." "And the city council member?" I asked, walking to stand near him, looking out at the Denver skyline. Croft's expression darkened. "I will handle that," he said, his voice dropping. "Anonymously. Some people deserve a public fall." I nodded. Justice. Real justice. My final bill. Mr. Croft. He turned from the window and gave a short, dry laugh. It was a startling sound in that severe office. Ms. Jensen, after what you found, after the documentation you provided, you did not just win a divorce. You saved my corporate client tens of millions of dollars in future lawsuits, not to mention the cost of a federal investigation. You did my job for me. You do not owe me a single cent. He paused, regarding me with that same intense, appraising look from our first meeting. In fact, he continued, I want to offer you a long-term consulting contract. This I had not anticipated, not as a divorce client, he clarified, but as an independent forensic consultant for my firm, for my most complex cases. Your work, Ms. Jensen, was immaculate. The offer hung in the air, a partnership with the most powerful law firm in the state, an alliance with the devil himself, but on my own terms. I considered it, the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of the clean ledger. I met his gaze. Send me the offer, Julian, I said. I'll have my lawyer look at it. I walked out of the conference room, through the silent, opulent lobby, and into the high-speed elevator. I descended 50 floors, the pressure changing in my ears, a symbolic unwinding. I stepped out of the high-rise office building, alone, into the bright, clear Denver afternoon. The sun was brilliant. The air was crisp. The skyline that Grant had tried to conquer, the one he had tried to build his fraudulent empire on, looked beautiful. It was not his. It was just a city. I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over my email, over the new reports, but I swiped past them. I opened a travel app. I searched for flights to Hawaii, someplace warm, with a clean blue ocean, just for me and Leo. I booked 2 first-class tickets for the following week. I put my phone back in my pocket and began to walk. I had just closed the most difficult file of my life, and in my mind, I opened a new one, a fresh, clean ledger. It had only my name on it. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'd love to connect with you, so please comment below and let me know where in the world you are listening from and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.